Hi and welcome to Script and Pencils from the Comic Crush. I'm your host Paul, as always, and I'm here today with Hoyt Silva and Doug Wagner. How you guys doing?
Hey, how's it going today?
Hey, how's it going? Doing all right.
Good, thank you. It's lovely to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us. You are the creators of Yumi. I've got to make sure I get this part of the title right. Yumi, Spy Fatale, Baddie, Royale.
That is correct. Guilty.
Yeah.
Which you've launched on Kickstarter in the last week or so. The book looks amazing.
Thank you so much.
It's so much fun. But I want to ask you guys, this kind of book seems almost tailor-made for one of the sort of indie publishers. What made you kind of pick the Kickstarter route instead of perhaps pitching out to one of those guys like Image or Boom or iDubbbz or Vault? What kind of made you go this route?
You want me to handle that one, Hoyt?
Oh, yeah,
Well, whichever way you want to go. Yeah, sure, dude. Go for it. Yeah. I'll back you up on this one. Go ahead.
I mean, we actually debated it quite a bit. We went back and forth on like, did we want to do it as a webcomic first? Did we want to do it straight to graphic novel? Did we want to do it as a miniseries? And honestly, like we were kind of debating the whole miniseries thing as the pandemic was hitting here in the U.S. And that kind of made us really take a step back and start rethinking of like how we wanted to put this out. And, like our comic book shops, how are they going to manage through this? At that point when we were talking about it, the comic shops here were closed. And so we kind of, took a step back and went, I think we want to do a Kickstarter and do it as original graphic novel straight out of the gate instead of having to worry about the individual issues. And I won't lie, there was a little bit of like, I really wanted a hardcover of it on my shelf. So, it was like trying to find the financial way of making that happen was actually easier to do on Kickstarter than it is to do like in traditional publishing. So that at least that was my take.
Yeah, and I think what else appealed to us too was just the format as well. Like being able to communicate like directly with the people who are interested in the story is something that Kickstarter offers us that a different route wouldn't. And also just that, we wanted to do something different. We didn't quite know like where that would go. And the fact that we could put out the whole story in a complete volume is very attractive. If we would have went through traditional publishing, we would have had to do issues. And like Doug said, there's all kinds of complications with that, including, what happened to us all last year with the pandemic and everything slowing it up. So it would have been like a logistical nightmare to have to deal with that stuff. So we ended up going that Kickstarter route. And I mean, I'm all happy for it because I think, again, I think it's fantastic to be able to see directly what people are interested in, what they like about it, to be able to communicate people as we like sort of put it out. So.
Okay. And am I right in saying that the entire thing is done and ready to go?
That is correct.
Yeah, 100%.
That is really unusual. That is just, I mean, that's great for a start,
yeah.
from a person who's backed Kickstarters before. Now, what drove that? Because obviously, I'm assuming that's a financial impact on you guys. If you've got to take time out of the other work that you're doing to create this, with no guarantee. I mean, obviously, I'm sure given your pedigree, there are a lot of people backing this and it is doing well and you're going to make money. But what made you take that kind of risk? Because that is a financial risk, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. That's my second time around on doing the same sort of thing. I did the same thing with a book I did with my other good friend, Trey Walker, called Last Stop, which we released as a webtoon first. And then we did a Kickstarter, and then we got picked up by a publisher afterwards. So it's one of those things, I think, because we wanted to do something like differently, the financial part, well, I'll let Doug handle that. Like, this is where we got 12 Gauge involved and like all that, and he's more on that side of things. So.
Well, I mean, what was interesting about it is that, and the story begins with like Hoyt and I sitting next to each other. We had tables next to each other at a convention, and we'd met before, but we didn't have a chance. Like, obviously when you're at a convention, you have a lot of time to spend together. So, you start talking, and we found out we had similar interests in the kind of stories we wanted to tell, that kind of thing. And honestly, like we sat down and went, let's do something, but let's do something we want to see. Like, let's not worry about pitching it and seeing if somebody's going to take it. Let's just make our own comic and do it the way we want to do it. and we'll worry about the rest later. I know that sounds insane, but honestly, that's how I do half my books.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't want to worry about like hardcore deadlines. I don't want to worry about like if Hoyt, because this has happened many times, somebody gets sick or they get hurt and, the book's delayed and it hurts it, it kills it in the stores.
Life gets in the way. Yeah. In general, it can be difficult.
And so, we just decided over, a few years that we were just going to do this on the side, and just make a comic we loved to put out there. And so, I mean, it's, it's a financial risk, obviously, but, if you're in comics, you're not necessarily in comics to make a lot of money. So you're like more worried about putting out good books.
It was definitely interesting. Like I said, I enjoyed making it the whole time through. And there is that like liberty when you're not beholden to somebody who's like got any command or say because they've got some kind of control over your livelihood, and having a partner that like understands obviously that like life can get in the way, things can happen, like I have to keep the lights on. So if I have to like run off and do a cover or do a different story that somebody else has shown up with a paycheck for or anything like that, that becomes a priority because I have to pay the bills and keep the lights on. But at the same time, it allowed us to do what we wanted to do, without worry of like how long it would take us or whether people would be into it or if someone putting up the money for it had some kind of special interest in whatever. Like we didn't have to worry about any of that. We were just like, we want to do this story. We want to do it this way. Let's let's just have fun with it. And that was the greatest part about it, I think. Because we had a lot of back and forth on that stuff as far as like the story creation and like how the format, like Doug said, we originally imagined it as a webcomic, and I actually drew a version of it that was purposely for the web, which was a much like simpler style and like everything that I thought would be more digestible for online. But then, we did get approached by 12 Gauge when they saw us at a different convention where we did like a little ash can printing sort of the character designs, and we just put it out, just kind of be like, will people even be interested in that? Like, do we have fans that would even vibe with the kind of story that we want to tell? And, people were super jazzed about it. And Kevin Gardner from 12 Gauge actually happened to come by Doug's table, see the thing and be like, hey, why haven't you guys told me about this? Like, and then we got into that discussion of like, well, maybe we shouldn't do it as a comic, like as a web comic. What if we did it as a series, and then that's where that conversation started and the format changed. And then once the format changed to that, and we were talking about putting it out sequentially by traditional publishing means, and then like I said, the whole COVID thing happened and we decided, well, maybe actually the Kickstarter route, with just the graphic novel. So it evolved a lot.
It's interesting. And then does that always then, as it evolves, does that always then have a knock-on effect on the style that you write in or drawing?
Yes.
Right.
For sure.
Okay.
I think
it can't help but have an impact, right? I mean, it's like even the way I was approaching it, because initially, like Hoyt said, we were thinking about like web comics. So you're thinking, okay, we could maybe deliver 2 or 3 panels a day back in those days. And that ended up being like 9 panels per page kind of thing. And of course, in comics, that's very rare that, you have a whole comic that's 9 panels a page.
Right.
And so it did open, at first you got to make that mental change of like, okay, let's try like 4 to 7 panels a page. And then it starts opening your mind like, oh, wait a minute, we can do splash pages and stuff. In webcomic, that's almost impossible.
Right.
And so for me, it definitely changed. Like, okay, we have to change how we're going to handle, like how we're going to approach some of these pages. And so I think, at least on that end, it was a lot easier on Hoyt because it's not 9 panels a page,
Yeah. Well, and I think the approach, once we decided that we were going to go for the whole story and do it all at once, it opened up the opportunity to not so much worry about traditional comic book page numbering as far as a lot of that stuff's concerned, because we weren't so worried about it working as an issue, because we then figured, oh, well, people will get to read the whole thing,
Right.
So like it has like a nice synergy, I think, that sometimes you miss out on when you're so worried about the individual pieces working from month to month to month to month. Sometimes you miss out on that link of the overall arc, but I feel like we hit that really well, or at least Doug did. So props to you, buddy. Yeah.
And do you find that because personally speaking, I in the last few years, I've seen the market kind of shift to a more OGN or serialized graphic novel format instead of the weeklies. And that continues to plow forward. You've seen, most of the major publishers doing it now. They're kind of shifting that way. Do you think that's kind of helped the Kickstarter model? Because so many of the Kickstarters aren't doing single floppy comics, they're looking at doing hardcovers or single volumes. Do you think those things have kind of coalesced, and that's one is helping to drive the other?
Well, that sounds like a one hand washes the other, both wash the face situation, where I think because Kickstarters already sort of have that, because people I think a lot of times people will not complete the work, but have an idea of what they want to do with the whole body of work. And then they come to Kickstarter. Whereas traditionally through stores, you would get you check out this one issue and see if you're interested in the rest as it goes on. But I think that's opened people up to realize that comics are a form of storytelling, akin to sort of movies and books and all of those other medium as well. And they get the whole story when they read that thing, or when they see that movie or whatever. And even Netflix and other online streaming platforms will drop an entire season of a show, on you, so that you could binge the entire show instead of watching it episode week to week. I think we've just learned something as an entertainment industry across all entertainment industries, that people are willing to sit down and consume something if you've got the quality and you can hook them, to go through the series. People are finding that a lot more satisfying. And we're in a culture now, I think, too, where everybody does things on their own time, so because that availability is there, they can do it on their own time. I think when you're trying to shoehorn people who aren't already used to going to the comic shop every week to get into that habit, you have to teach a habit. And that's a little more difficult to do than something when you can say, hey, here's the book. When you get a second, give it a read kind of thing. I feel like that fits a lot more in with our culture. So I think we're seeing a move on all fronts coalescing on that same sort of vibe.
I like where you were going to with the, you're seeing it in stores big time, the graphic novels have caught up and even surpassed, at least in the US, the floppy market. And I know for me, when you start thinking about Kickstarter side of things, to do a single issue, financially is so expensive versus doing the trade. And so and you've seen the same thing. I mean, the average comic on Kickstarter, I think, is $10, $15 a pop, where, you can get a whole graphic novel for say $25, $30. And so I think the return on investment, for the consumer is a lot more. And so I think they respond better to a full story in a single sit, in a single book, than they do necessarily spreading it out, one issue every 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, especially if somebody's unfamiliar with the format too. I think what Kickstarter gives us the ability to do is to reach people that are not just into comics, but are just into things. So they might be into our thing, and if they are, that's awesome, but they might have never read a comic before. So I think it's harder to get somebody that's never done something like that to commit on something where they won't get the entire experience because they're not familiar with the idea that that's how that's built or that's how that works. Whereas when you can give somebody the full thing, them not knowing anything about us or whatever, they can just pick up the book, they can just get the whole story and read the whole thing. So I think,
And is it great for you guys having that freedom? Because obviously you're both established in the industry. You're both known within the comics industry. Is it great having that freedom of being able to, okay, so for the first 3 months of 2021, I'm doing this Kickstarter, but then I can go to Image or I can go to Boom and I can pitch this. Do you like having that freedom to be able to do that, or are you kind of dead set now that you want to have the full freedom to do the Kickstarter stuff?
I like the freedom of having it all,
If I can have my cake and eat it too, that's the best situation, right? Yeah.
Yep, exactly. I love the fact that, I can still go and do regular comics because I still love those, that'll never go away. But at the same time, Hoyt and I can do something that's almost like a specialty project for he and I. and still do it as a graphic novel on Kickstarter, not have to worry about, necessarily all the same things we have to worry about with the traditional route. Hoyt keyed on it a little bit earlier. Like, I mean, what's great about the Kickstarter, you feel like you're actually involved with the people buying your book. And sometimes you lose that in the traditional market because, they kind of ship it out and you don't know. Like it goes out and nobody knows, the only thing you ever, if you're at cons, which obviously aren't happening now, you can get some feedback from fans. But yeah, I mean, I love the experimentation of it. I love like trying new things on a regular basis and seeing what clicks and what doesn't. So for me right now, I love being able to bounce back and forth doing both. That's, I love it.
Yeah. And I think it's such a, because we're going direct and we don't have the middleman of distribution, I think like that ability gives us to fund what we actually really dream about doing, which is putting the book out, at a place that now we can be in the position where we can try to get the book out there to even more people, starting with the base of like what we've printed and done for the Kickstarter and the word we've gotten out for that, and I think that that's like really important to have that positioning afterwards as well, and that maneuverability. Yeah. So I think it's awesome that you can do that. For example, with Last Stop, we ended up that same route. We got funded and then we got in talks with Scout and we got our book published through Scout. And to have that option where we got our core fan base got involved, they got a special edition of the book that was like the Kickstarter exclusive stuff, and give them that ability. And then, now there's like a store version you can go out and buy and stuff, which is cool too. So to have that two-prong attack like helped a lot. Obviously we hope for a lot of the same with 12 gauge and what we're doing with Yumi. So yeah, it's having that option is important. I think it's good to be able to do both. Like that's just the flexibility that is there now was not there before, say 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, so.
And how have you found 12 gauge in terms of working with them so far? Because again, the assumption is they get the book afterwards and they're going to bring it out in stores, as we've talked about. How have they been in terms of being a publisher?
For me, incredible. Yeah. I mean, it's been great. I mean, they've been patient with us. They listen to us. I mean, we've had several.
They believed in us.
Yeah, they believe in us. Exactly. I mean, they've kind of everything they've done has been fantastic on our side, because I mean, like, just the belief is a big one. But when you're having conversations about like, hey, we want to do it this way, and Hoyt and we're like, we really want to do it around Valentine's Day because it is, there's kind of like a love story in here. And so they were very like, they listened, and then they hit us back with like, okay, here's the financial things. What do you think? So yeah, I mean, being involved in all of that and learning about, a lot more about that side of the business was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like Doug touched on it, like the belief on it, you go to a lot of times you create something and you don't know if that thing, if people will even be interested, like if someone outside of you will like that thing as you start to create it. But then to have an entity like 12 gauge and, Kevin Gardner behind us, like really to give us the platform to say, hey, well, you guys do what you want to do. You know what I mean? Like, and whenever we would turn things in, to have that turn of not someone that's sitting there going like, oh, well, you can't do this. And no, just watch out with this. But someone to literally be there and go, whoa, that's awesome. Like, I can't wait to see the rest. Like, this is great. Like, oh man, I can't believe you guys are doing this. And that's incredible, and coming at that kind of angle, I think that like injected extra sort of vigor into the project as we worked on it too, because I think there's a lot of, at least for me, stylistically, I was trying for a lot, and, so I worry, I get a lot of anxiety over like whether people will even like receive, whether I'm being clear, whether I'm actually like able to communicate whatever the storytelling thing that's going on is. And so to have someone like Kevin on that other side, and also our editor, Lisako, who were able to like look at what we were doing from page to page, scene to scene, and book to book, and just kind of like help us, stay online with what we actually wanted to do. And that was huge. That belief that like, hey, we can do it, and what we're doing is awesome, even though it's not like stuff that people have done before. you know, because I think that's something you'll come across with Yumi if anyone checks it out, is that it's been done before, but it's never been done in quite this way. And we had a really, really fun time doing that. So
and let's talk about the storyline and the characters in there, because the speed of the book really impressed me, because you're straight in right at the beginning into a lot of action, a lot of fun, and very much into Yumi's character in terms of her being a sort of younger person who just processes everything very fast, you know, and I really enjoyed that element of it. You can see a lot of influences in the book straight away. You know, obviously, you know, Bond being the primary one, I'm guessing, and then to a certain degree, The Matrix. At least I felt anyway. But what for you guys were the sort of primary influences in coming up with Yumi as a character and the story as a whole?
So I'll start this one off. Yeah, you hit it on the head right there real quick. I mean, awesome that you said the thing about like how impressed you were with the speed. That was like really one of my biggest anxiety points, that it would read fast enough and actually read as an action book. You know, that's like one of my biggest fears, especially since I was drawing in a more realistic style than I've done on other properties and stuff. So that had me sort of tense. So that's the biggest relief I've heard anybody say about the book to this point. So thank you. But yeah, James Bond was a huge influence right off the bat. Definitely films like The Matrix in general, like lots and lots of action films, both classic and new. I watched a lot of that kind of stuff to figure out how to shoot a scene, how to actually like choreograph some of the action that we were talking about doing in some of those fight scenes, because it does get quite over the top. And yeah, but the character really started off from, I was actually reading the Ian Fleming James Bond novels at the time. Okay. And about a week before this conversation happened between Lisako and I, our editor, I had met Doug actually. And we had the conversation Doug was talking about just at a convention, and we were just sort of kicking around ideas, you know, like what we would like to do and what would be fun and what we like. And, you know, we liked explosions and, you know, badass female leads and like all this stuff. So we, you know, I was just vibing sort of from that. And I had this conversation a week later or so with who ended up becoming our editor, Lisako, and we were just talking about the Bond books, and she sort of brought up the topic that, you know, there wasn't really anything like that for her. Like, she enjoyed it, she thought it was all cool, but like there wasn't anything geared like that towards her at all, for her own consumption enjoyment, you know. And so we started talking about all the tropes in the genre, how much fun that stuff was, how stupid a lot of the stuff was, you know, things like you know, how the females are all named like incredibly like sexist names and all that, and like how dumb over the top that is, and how, you know, and then so we joked around how that should be flipped on its head if we did the opposite, you know, and did like do male characters with like names like that, and that conversation happened. And funny enough, serendipitously enough, I think Doug even called me like the next day, or we got on the phone the next day, you know, and Doug was just kind of like, hey man, like, do you have something for me? And I was just like, well, dude, I just came out of this conversation. Here's what we were talking about. Here's what came of it. You know, here's this idea for a character. And at that point, it was literally just like this X that would go after, you know, James Bond essentially. And then Doug just like, you know, did awesome with that. I mean, he just like super responded. He loved the idea. Obviously, we both loved and started riffing on the whole James Bond, Ian Fleming thing, all from a place of love, of course. And then, you know, Doug like sort of went off and came back with this freaking awesome outline. I'll let you take it from there, dude.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started talking, one of the key things for me was that we wanted to do something that was like really action based, but a lot of fun too. Because I think both of us had been working on projects that were like really dark,
serious,
and you know, yeah, very serious. You know, slower paced books, and we kind of needed that break from all of that. And I just wanted to do something that was like kind of out of control. And so when Hoyt brought that to me, I was like, yes, let's do that. But let's like make her young. Let's like, you know, let's have fun with this. Let's take the tech to another level, you know, kind of going with the James Bond stuff. But obviously the key is to me is always character. And so like, I wanted to be in love with the character when I was writing her. And so I wanted like this young, sassy, like really intelligent, female lead that could hold her own with anyone. And just having her go through the entire world, and especially all the intelligence agencies, and bring them down almost nonchalantly. Like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. I'm looking for my boyfriend, and if you don't tell me, I'll burn everything to the ground. And that's, that's honestly where I came from. And then, Hoyt came up with the idea of like adding like almost like a Snapchat, TikTok kind of like meme thing going on through it.
It was a great addition.
I think, yeah. That was a lot of fun. And then, the fact that she's taking pictures, and Snapchatting as she's, burning down MI6 is just like one of the funnest things I think I've read in our stuff that we've done together.
Yeah.
And then we came up with this idea of adding music to it, like that she actually listens to a soundtrack to kind of keep herself pumped, while she's doing it, and trying to figure out how to do that in a comic book, so we had to get together with everybody, like Kevin Lineritz, the colorist, and Frank Koivik, the letterer, and like, guys, how is this possible? Like, how can we sell this? Yeah,
And all that credit for the notes floating and all that stuff, that credit goes to Frank. He killed that, our letterer. He came up with the idea. He just like said, hey man, I could do this thing. And he showed us, he sort of pitched it to us and we were like, all right, sure. Like, let's see what that looks like kind of thing. But then when he came back, what he came back with was just incredible. We're like, oh my God, that hits exactly the vibe that we want. It really, gets the point across of what we're doing, and it helps flow the story along. So we instantaneously like, well, that's what we're doing. That's the jam for the music there. And I think that was a lot of the fun of it too, is we had no idea went unconsidered when we were throwing things back and forth, from wherever they came from. We're like, okay, well, what about this thing? Like, does this work? Like, can we do this? And a lot of that also came from watching those movies and all that stuff and seeing those tropes and going, oh man, we've seen this before, but we've never seen it like this. Like, how do we do that differently? And yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. I thoroughly enjoyed our process. And I think in the end, we got something that is neither mine nor Doug's, but a combination of ours and everybody else's like stuff involved and influence, which was the best product we could have ended up with, to be honest.
And those kind of things that you've added are, when you look at, say, Bond films or the Harry Palmer series and things like that, those were very influenced by pop culture at the time. When we say pop, we think, or at least, older guys, I guess, like myself do, you think 60s first. And when you look at, say, ignoring the privacy issues, messaging amongst young people and Snapchat and WhatsApp and things like that, what is it but a form of secret messaging that, is only meant for a select set of eyes? And I love how you've managed, without kind of directly saying it, you've kind of managed to just put that stuff in. And those things are kind of really apparent and they're cool, it's really good.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think like you hit it on the head there. That's the same stuff we were considering, which is like pop culture stuff, because one of the things that when we were thinking about how Yumi would be, is we wanted something that would be a modern representation of Bond, but in a new way, and that would almost be his opposite if we chose to do it today. And so like a lot of that like pop culture stuff came from the same mindset we had hoped that sort of Fleming was in at the time he created Bond, because he added a lot of those things to make Bond be debonair, that was like cool at the time, right? I mean, he drove an Aston Martin because that was like the car of the time, right? Like, so we decided like, okay, cool, like, well, what is our car of the time? Like, what do we like that, like, we think will be a car that people will look like and go, oh man, that car is sweet, years from now, kind of thing. And that everybody could recognize, and Lamborghini came up. So, Lamborghini Aventador is what we decided. Yeah. And again, like that, I think that also helps illustrate that we pull all the stops. We just didn't care. It's like, yeah, spy car, Lamborghini, awesome. Shock blue, great. Let's roll with it. There was no,
I love the fact that it's so conspicuous as well.
Absolutely. That was the fun of it, like when we were riffing and doing that anti-spy, like the opposite of James Bond thing, it was like, all right, she shows up, she blows everything up. There's no suave, like, oh, I'm gonna sneak in here and do this thing without anyone knowing. It's like, no, the thing I want is in there. Let me just open the can and get it, you know, kind of thing. And so it was a lot of fun, man.
And
I
she's
think
like
Doug,
the opposite of like what you normally see in a spy trope is like the smooth operator. You know, and she comes in and she's like, she'll ask you. She's not going to try to like gently pull it out of you. It's like, do you know where he is? Then I'll kill you. You know, it's like there's none of this like, oh, let me try to maneuver and you know be tricky about this and like try to get you to do what I want. It's like hers is very direct. And like I said, we were kind of going for that exact opposite of what you'd expect Bond to do in that situation.
right?
Yeah, and it is more kind of it takes you directly into the action faster again, which is another thing is just the speed of the book that it comes at you is amazing. Were you ever worried that it was too fast or that stuff might have been a bit too self-consciously cool? Was that ever a concern? I mean, I don't think it is, but was there ever a concern that it might
The self-conscious
lean over into that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We did have moments where we were like, is this just cool to us? You know, like the people involved, the few people involved. But I think we had enough diverse input from different people with different perspectives that we were able to see. Once we were close enough to being finished and we sort of had some friends read it and like check it out and stuff. We started to realize, okay, yeah, we did, you know, hit that right level where people who aren't Doug and I understand what's going on. And on terms of speed of the book, as far as like the art is concerned, as I mentioned earlier, like my whole concern was trying to make it as fast as possible because I was worried I was going to slow it down. You know, I have this like theory that basically the more detail you add in a scene and in a place, in a specific piece of art or panel, that's more time you're asking the person subconsciously to spend on there. And since we had done a more realistic style, I mean, I did take several passes on it. Actually, I mean, I cleaned up a lot of the action scenes as we went through and simplified things and redid them a few times to make sure that I got that right level of detail that I felt like it moved properly. So hearing you say that it moves super fast is actually exciting to me because again, we were doing an action story in a comic book, and a comic book in general being a book is a slower read than like watching a movie or something like that. So the fact that you're saying that it read fast enough is just thrilling to me. I mean, that was the objective. So I'm super happy to hear that hit.
And if I can ask Doug, from a craft standpoint, did the kind of speed that you guys wanted the book to go at change, say, and I know it kind of seems like a nonsensical thing to ask, but I'm always curious about the craft of writing and especially editing. Did it change the number of words that you wanted to put into a caption or a panel description? Were you kind of self-consciously kind of really kind of cutting it down to the bare essentials, or did you feel that you kind of had the luxury to go as long as you wanted? And then it's kind of Hoyt's problem to fix.
Well, I always approach it as how I would want to read it. You know, me personally as a fan, like what am I looking for? Because I think if I write something that I think is good enough for me, I think it's going to resonate with other people. So you'll notice, like, depending on what part of the story you're in. So like in the action scene, especially in the beginning, you know, it's very succinct, and I wanted it to be like nice and quick until you get to M's office. And then like, okay, let's slow this down a little bit so I can add more dialogue so that like the reader has to slow down a little bit so you understand like there's some tension going on here.
And take a breath.
Back up. Yeah, take a breath a little bit. And so, yeah, I mean, that's always in play, but it really just comes down to almost like the musical beats in a story. You know, it's like, do I want to slow it down? Do I want to speed it up? You know, but I mean, it didn't affect me. Like, I don't have to worry about Hoyt. I know he's going to pull off a great page. So that part's pretty easy. It's just, yeah, I mean, I always try to be succinct, and in comics, you kind of have to be, you know, I mean, but you're right. When you're doing like a lot of action, how do you deliver all the important information to the reader? Like, how do I tell you that Yumi's talking to her dad on the phone? How can I do that as quickly as possible, but like not do it so fast that you forget about it? You know, like there's a delicate balance you have to find there. And that's, I mean, Hoyt will tell, I mean, we went through a couple of rewrites on the dialogue too, just trying to get everything down. You know, it's like, okay, Hoyt and I read it. We understood everything, but wait a minute, Lasako would read it. I can't talk today. And she'd say, hey, I don't understand what this means. And I'd be like, okay, let's go back and take another pass.
Oh,
yeah.
Nancy.
Yep, froze for just there for a second.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it happens.
Yeah, and I think what Doug's tapping on too helped us a lot, where we had a lot of back and forth because, Doug would write the issue or that chunk, that quarter, the first quarter, right? I mean, we're calling it an issue, but like the first quarter of the story he wrote with all those scenes. And I sort of laid all of that out, then kicked it back Doug's way. And then Doug had an opportunity there and then while I started working on the pages to see the direction I was going and see if there were opportunities where maybe I handled something in the action so he could change the dialogue and didn't specifically have to say something, or, he doesn't have to have a line of dialogue where the character says, I'm angry, if I've drawn the character with an angry face, and he might have that in the dialogue when he first writes it because he has no idea what's going to go in that panel. But once he saw the layouts, he was able to tighten that stuff up. And yeah, we did go through rewrites, redraws, all kinds of stuff to get it as tight as we possibly could, because there were moments even after I saw the dialogue on another pass, I was like, well, I see what you wrote there, man. And I see what the character's saying now. So let me tighten this thing up a little bit more, to make that work better. So there was a lot of synergy throughout the project for that stuff.
Were there any sequences or scenes that you found particularly difficult that you had to keep kind of going back to?
That's all the action scenes were tough for me.
Right.
All the action scenes were tough, just because on a level of communication and being able to clearly depict the action and people be able to follow along, is something that I was gravely worried about. Our editor Lisaka helped me out with that a lot. Lots of showing her layouts and going hey, do you get what's going on here, kind of thing, and her just looking at it and going I don't know what this is, or I don't understand this, or that's not working, or is this person supposed to be doing this? Any question where I failed where that clarity wasn't there, I went back to the layouts and sort of tightened them up and tried to get something better there. She was a really good red team for that stuff. And so that, I think just all that back and forth, because we spent a lot of time on that end of it, once we got to actually drawing it and getting it all out there, it was a lot easier, even though there were still redraws after that, like I said, but they weren't after a certain point, there were no more redrawing whole pages. It was just oh, let me tweak this panel. Oh, let me get this expression right. Let me, as best I could with the time that I had,
Cool.
That's another factor. So.
Yeah, and I think for me, it was honestly, it was the same. It was the action scenes are a little bit tougher to write on dialogue because you worry about you don't want to slow things down. But at the same time, you kind of want to tell a different story than you're showing. So you want these two characters to be having a conversation that may or may not actually be about the fight.
Right.
And so how do you manage that? And we wanted Yumi to kind of be, if she was going to be smooth, this was in the fights where she's trying to trick people into telling her what she needs them to tell, because she highly respects them as a femme fatale. And she's like, I'm not just going to bluntly ask you, I'm going to kind of walk you into giving the information to me. And so that was fun. And then, of course, the fact that Jules, the Lamborghini, started talking like Cardi B, that was intimidating because, I watched probably 20 hours of nothing but Cardi B interviews and would queue them up every time I had to rewrite it. I'd be like, okay, I want to make sure because I wanted to totally respect Cardi B, but at the same time not have it come across as offensive to anybody. I didn't want her to read it and go, that's not how I speak, or that I wouldn't say that, and so that's, when you're dealing, because I love Cardi. And so I did not want her to read my book eventually and go this guy's a butthead. And if I ever see him, I'm going to tell him he totally misrepresented me.
Yeah. Yeah. We wanted it to be, if any of that stuff was going to come across, we wanted it to be from a position that we thought that person would be honored or enjoy that role, that position. So yeah, and I was adamant about Cardi myself, Lisaka, our editor, also. We just huge Cardi fans, just huge. I am a giant Cardi B fan, and so that's I can't say enough how awesome that was that Doug went that route, and we had a lot of fun with it. I think her personality fits the role of Jules and sort of a best friend to Yumi as any other character we could have possibly ever come up with. You know, like that's the car I want to be my best friend. You know, like that's
Right.
like so like that's I don't know, man. Like there was no other route for me. I think
It's this generation's kit. There you go. You got.
yeah. So.
Can I just ask about the covers, because you've got some amazing artists like Loish and many others working on sort of covers for you there. Can I just ask what's the sort of process of getting those guys to work on the book? Is that an easy process, or was it something? Did it take a lot of negotiation, or is it just
an
a matter of
anxiety-driven process for sure? Because I respect the hell out of these people, so showing them my work is like, you know, like I'm just the whole time like, oh my god, please don't hate me, you know. When we pass it
I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Still, man,
review,
you know,
really.
I get in my own way, you know. I'm just like, oh my god, please don't hate me for life. So other than that, we went over sort of asking each other cover artists, right? I mean, that's the first, when we started getting to that point and the book was done, you know, I knew I would do a cover, but you know, 12 Gauge was sort of asking us like, who would we be interested in seeing if they would be interested in doing a cover. And so we had to come up with our lists, you know, and for me personally, Loish was at the top of my list, like every.
Oh, sorry, I've said it wrong. I'm like.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, Loish. Lois. Her name is No, you're fine. She goes by Loish, I believe, online, and her name is Lois. So I whichever way. So Loish like definitely like was at the top of my list, and I was just like, okay, that's my shot in the dark, number one. Hopefully that happens, kind of thing, you know, because I've just been such a huge fan of her work for a long, long time. And we had a couple of different lists that came up, and I just kept putting her at the top. Like, hey, I would love this woman to do something. That would be just thank you so much, you know. And then they told us that. Well, I think Doug got Eliza actually first, right? So I mean, I'll let Doug take that.
Yeah, that was I've met Eliza back probably about 5 years ago at San Diego Comic-Con. She always sets up there, and you know, I didn't know who she was when I walked by her table the first time, to be honest. But I mean, immediately when you see her art, you're like, oh my God, who is this? And I need to know more about her. And so even back then I talked to her about possibly doing a cover. And at that point, she wasn't really interested in doing comic book covers. You know, she was working at Pixar, and she kills it on her own, you know, with her sketchbooks and all of that kind of stuff anyway. And the next year I saw her, she recognized me. We talked a little bit. I was like, are you still not interested in doing covers? She's like, no, not interested in doing it. And then the third year, same thing, walked up and said, you know, hey, just want to double check. And she goes, you know, I think I have room in my schedule. And, you know, I was like, oh my God, yeah, of course, you know, whatever you need. And so, and like Hoyt said, like, I mean, what's been really fun about Yumi in the process is Hoyt and I will get on the phone, and it's whether it's a story, whether it's cover artist, whatever that is, and we'll go, no holds barred. What would you want to do?
What would you want? Yeah.
What would you want? And then Hoyt was like, I want Lois. And I'm like, I mean, why not ask? Like, it can't hurt, right? So, I mean, honestly, like, a lot of it was just luck. Like, Eliza agreeing to do it was, we kind of right time, right place. And when we contacted Lois, exactly the same thing. She was like, hey, if you can wait till December, I've got a date. And we're like, we can wait. We will wait until December.
I immediately responded to everybody, we will be waiting until December for this cover, you know? It's like, so hold the strap in, you know? Like, we're not going anywhere.
And both of them, I mean, what's scary about both of them is they might be two of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. Both of them. Like, they're both just the sweetest, kindest, most professional people I've ever met.
Yeah.
And then the Chris Bruner cover was kind of like a surprise for both Hoyt and I, because I think Chris Bruner contacted Kevin Gardner and said, hey, I want to do a cover, you know, can you help me out? And Kevin said, well, here's all our properties. And Chris Bruner read Yumi and went, I love this book. I have to do a cover for it. So Kevin didn't tell us until after Chris and Rico had done the cover, and it just showed up in our inbox. And Hoyt and I were like, what's this?
Yeah.
Like,
I was like, yo, did you get this cover done? Like, what happened? Where'd this come from? Kind of thing. And yeah, it showed up, and it was a hugely pleasant surprise. Those guys are amazing. Their work is incredible. incredible storytellers both, and just have that show up as well, you know, and Eliza's cover. I mean, I was floored when Doug originally told me that we got Eliza, I was like, what? Like, I was jumping up and down excited because I'm just as big of a fan of hers as I am of Lois's. And so I was just jumping up and down for joy for that stuff. But what I didn't realize is that at the time that he had spoken to Eliza, we were considering doing it as a series and releasing individual issues. So he spoke to her about doing covers. I heard cover, you know, so I was already like just blown away, so ecstatic, you know, and I think like as a testament to sort of how well people have been receiving the story, which has been surprising, is that everyone has been like so quick to like give us the work or do the work or like turn in their covers or anything like that, which is surprising because sometimes people take a long time, you know. So, you know, they got stuff to get around to, you know, whatever. I speak from knowing as the artist who takes a bunch of time and stuff like that, so I get it, you know. But then you know, we're going and we're planning things and setting things up, and I'm going through the folders, sort of looking at all the files, and I get to the covers folder and I see that there's like a second cover in there by Eliza. And I literally was like, man, what is, I called Doug. I think I was on the phone with Doug and I was like, hey, what the hell is this? I was like, what is this going on here? Like, do we have a second, is this like a second cover? What's going on? And then, yeah. And then he was like, oh yeah, she did too, because we were doing the issues and whatever. And yeah, man, it was just, that was a super extra awesome, pleasant surprise to get to from such an amazingly talented person. You know, I think I've worked on a lot of other people's stuff and only a few times on like what is truly mine. And so to see other people do things based on characters that I've designed or came up with or worked into a story, it really does something special for me, because I think I come from a position when I'm working on that stuff as I think like I'm the guy who's going to do that and that's it. You know, like we'll do this one story and then like, you know, there it is and it'll exist and I'll be the person to do that. And then when you start seeing other people show up to do your character, it's like really, I don't know, it really blows me away because I don't expect it, you know, like it really surprises me on any level, anybody to enjoy it that much, to want to like actually also create from that position, I think means a lot. So yeah, it was just mind blowing to see them all come through with their covers, all smash it out of the park. Like there were 0 edits for any cover period at all. Everybody did what they wanted to do, you know, like we were just thrilled to be along for the ride. And to bring it back to 12 gauge as well, again, having them on board and like them be just as excited about everything as we are, you know, and to like know that, hey, we're getting these awesome people to work on stuff, to give us our space to do it, to give them their space to do it. It was just big, you know. I think none of the things that we had done to this point would have turned out as well as they did had we not had that kind of support behind us the whole time.
Right.
So.
And I know that isn't, I've had several people ask us how we got Lois and Eliza, and it's like, I know the stories we just told don't help anybody. And I can tell you, like, it's honestly, you have to get away from the fear and you just have to ask people and be open to whether they say no or yes and be nice about it the whole time. Like, we completely treated them with respect from day one. You know, and we're like, hey, we love your work. If you have time, we'd like to, you know, and so, you know, we got lucky. You know, there was a timing issue there, but, you know, I mean, for Eliza, it took me 3 years to get her to finally agree to do the cover. You know, I wasn't harassing her, you know, on social media or any of that kind of stuff. Is once a year I'd meet, whether we would talk. You know, she's very nice and respectful. You know, she's like, hey, I like the book you're working on, blah, 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 blah. You know, we go through all that and be like, are you still interested in not doing covers? And then I'd stop. If she said no, there's no more. So it's just about building that relationship, treating people with respect, and approaching it like not harassing people to try to get them to do a cover, but like just like, hey, if you have time, we'd love to get you to do a cover. And
and to be understanding too. I think like Doug is a super understanding person, and if he approaches somebody about like, hey, you know, would you be interested in this? And someone says, hey, it's not for me. There's no offense in that, you know, like it's just not for you. Like, that's cool. That's fine. We'll move on to the next thing. You know, I think, there's a difference between like, oh, you messed up and like, you're not the one, you know? And so like that, like, I think that difference is huge. So when you treat people with respect and you receive respect in return, I think is big. So, and everybody who worked on the book was just amazing. Everybody down from letterers to designers to everything. I mean, colorists, editors, I mean, everything. Everybody did awesome. So,
yeah, it's a wonderful looking book. It reads wonderfly. And I think that the team you've got working with you are a fantastic team, and certainly people to watch. From scripts all the way to finished art and letters, the book is phenomenal. So well done, guys. I really enjoyed reading it. Now the Kickstarter runs for 21 days.
Yeah, I think we have
right?
21 more days. It ends at the very beginning of March. So like around March 3rd, I think, is when it finally ends up.
No, I think actually March 11th. Actually.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, March 11th. Yeah.
I've lost all track of time anyway. So.
It's all good. Yeah. Let me double check that because I may be wrong. Yeah, March 11th.
Okay, March 11th. Yep.
March 11th.
And so for anyone watching, if you go to the Comic Crush right now, there's a new section on the Comic Crush called the Crowdfunding Crush, which is all about Kickstarter and Indiegogo comics and all those kind of crowdfunded books. Which of course need your help to become a reality. And there is a link for you guys to support this book. So you can just click that and that will take you straight to these guys' Kickstarter, and you can help them get that book out into stores and get it out to anyone that wants it. But you're doing fairly well on the Kickstarter right now. You've got quite a lot of the money that you need, which is fantastic. But of course, I'm sure you guys have stretch goals and things like that you want to kind of push at. So guys, if you are watching this and thinking, yes, that sounds like a book I would like to help, head over to the Comic Crush. There's a link right there and you can do that. But Doug and Hoyt, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us about the book. Amazing book.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you for having us, man. Yeah, pleasure, absolutely. So thank you for letting us talk your ear off there.
That's okay. And I hope whatever you guys do next, you'll be willing to come on and talk to us again. And
absolutely.
I'd love to kind of keep abreast of whatever you guys are doing. So
always in the mood for good conversation, man. So anytime.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And for you guys at home watching, we'll catch you next time on The Crush.